This is my older brother. So my parents were transferred from the Tanforan racetrack to Topaz, Utah, near Delta in Utah. His name is Kiyoshi. You could see the barracks in the background. Very flimsy buildings. The people often talk about how when the wind blew, the dust would come in and everybody would have to go to sleep with wet handkerchiefs or pieces of cloth over their face so they wouldn't inhale the sand and the dust that would come through. In 1943, by 1943, the U.S. government had two dilemmas. They were recognizing that it costs a lot of money to house 125,000 people and to feed them. The U.S. Army was concerned they wouldn't have enough soldiers to fight in Europe and in the Pacific Islands. So together they came up with this questionnaire, which is euphemistically called the loyalty questionnaire, in order to begin releasing people from the prison camp. But they had already, through the newspapers and all the other news outlets, claimed that Japanese Americans and Japanese immigrants on the West Coast were a threat to national security. Now they wanted to release hundreds of these people because they couldn't afford to keep sustaining the level that they had started out with. The U.S. Army wanted to begin drafting young men out of the prison camps to go fight. So there were a series of questions. The most important one was question 27 and 28, because they wanted documentation. Now, they didn't have a court hearing or a trial to determine who was guilty or who was innocent. They were removed and based on their ancestry, if they had 1/60 Japanese blood. So this question was now to reassure the public that those who were in the prison camps who were about to be released were in fact loyal to America by answering two questions after they had already spent over a year in prison. So the first question asked if you would be willing to join the armed forces and be on combat duty. And the second question had to do with a statement that said that you would faithfully defend the United States and disavow any loyalty to the Japanese emperor. And many of the people in the prison camp didn't even know who the emperor was. And this loyalty questionnaire was the basis for determining who would be released, who would be drafted into military service, and who would be labeled as loyal. This is my father's, got this out of the National Archives. My father answered no to both questions, because by this time, they had a child and they had me on the way. And they had felt betrayed by their country of birth. They felt that there was no hope for a good life for their children. And so one of the things that was very torturous for them is they never knew what was going to happen the next day, the next week, the next year. And in that very limited resource, there were lots of rumors. And the rumor was, if you answered no, you would be able to stay longer in the prison camps because there was so much hostility out in the streets. The people who were being slowly released, there was a lot of news that came back that said they were shot at, they wouldn't be hired for jobs, no housing would be available to them. But even more than that, my parents had given up hope about America making it possible for their children to live a life of safety and possibility. So when you answered no, most people who answered no were segregated to a maximum security prison called Tule Lake. It was the segregation center. It doubled the number of armed guards inside of guard towers, and they raised the height of the fencing that went around with the barbed wire. And so, you know, I asked my mother, why, when they're in prison, why would they have another child? And she said that because they didn't know what was going to happen to them. The rumor was, the more children you had, the less likely you would be separated. So I was kind of joke with my brother saying, well, you were born out of hope and possibility, because she was pregnant before the war. But that I was born out of despair and possibility. This is me. I like to show this because see the paper in my hand? I like to say that's the first petition I ever passed. This is an important picture because it shows the barracks. You can see how the conditions there. The pants my brother is wearing, my mother made out of her overcoat. So, there's another very important process that I learned as I was doing the research, and then having discovered my parents' my mother's diary that she kept every day, and my father's haiku poetry journal. So my father stood up in a meeting when he learned that the young men were being drafted out of prison camps. He stood up and made a 5-sentence speech, essentially saying we should be treated equal to the free people, and if we are freed, that he would be willing to do whatever the government asks of him. So as a consequence, he was charged with sedition, which is a law that says if you impede the efforts to draft for the military, that was a federal offense. And he was taken from us, so that rumor turned out not to be true. He was taken from us, and so my mother was left, and my father, for weeks we didn't know exactly where he was or what happened. And he was sent to Bismarck, North Dakota, which was a different kind of prison camp. It's the Federal Department of Justice prison camp. Those are the only ones that are called internment camps, because those are legal internment camps governed by the Geneva Convention. And so there were standards of living, requirements for taking classes. And in Bismarck, North Dakota, there was a swimming pool. There were also German and a few Italian prisoner of war men held there. And so they began writing letters to each other. And my mother referred to herself and the other women as internment widows. So left behind in prison with children. And my mother talked about how every day she would have to carry one of us and hold the hand of the other to walk from the barracks to the mess hall for their meals each day. It was a very hard time for her.